guys! How's it going? Earlier this month, Call Down the Hawk was finally released, and I've gotta say, I am so excited. I am a huge Ronan fan, and this entire series focuses on him and his abilities. I haven't started reading it yet because I wanted to be able to sit down and talk about my hopes and expectations for the book versus, what eventually happens when I read it. So hopefully there will be a follow-up video for that. I stayed away from everything I possibly could, all the spoilers and everything for this book before it came out. I know there was a leak, and then part of it was pre-released for people to build up the anticipation and the hype, but I have not read any of it. I have not looked at any of it, and I've just sort of avoided it and blacklisted it on everything, so I don't know what's gonna happen, but I have lots of hopes, and a lot of fears too, so let's get into that. Now, the original series, The Raven Cycle, was released in 2012, I believe. I really didn't pay it much mind when it first came out. I honestly ignored it. I did not care. I was in the middle of university, so it's not really surprising that I didn't have a heck of a lot of time to sit down and read for the fun of it. Most of my degree was reading, and most of it was not fun or, recreational in any way. But my best friend just kept hounding me, and she's like, you need to read this series, you need to read this series, and I am so glad that I did, because I have not enjoyed a series as much as I have this one since, Harry Potter and The Women of the Other World. And if you don't know what that second series is, if you are a paranormal horror romance fan, I highly suggest checking it out. It's by Kelly Armstrong, a Canadian author, and it just features a whole bunch of badass women doing their thing, so it is really awesome, and I suggest you read it. So what did I like about The Raven Cycle and The Raven Boys? It introduced a female protagonist that I didn't hate. And that is so incredibly rare. It is hard to find a female character that is written well and you can actually relate to. You often see female protagonist characters' roles revolving around the men in their life at some point, and that just did not happen. The original series focused on Blue Sergeant, who is a badass woman who is her own person, has her own personality that is not defined by anybody else. I mean, it's super important that the character of Blue maintained an identity and a personality outside of the male characters. Blue was just an individual from beginning to end, and that was incredibly important for anybody reading the book to experience. The male characters in the series, they don't adhere to this toxic masculinity that we often see in media and literature, that, men and boys have to act a certain way. They were all their own individuals, they all had their own weaknesses and their own strengths. They were just allowed to be people. They were allowed to feel and they were allowed to experience, and they still managed to experience a growth in character from the beginning of the series to the end of the series. It was beautiful to read. Nobody in the series is a stereotype, which is even better. You have some aspects that could be considered stereotypical, but they are portrayed and written in a way that just breaks all those boundaries. Now that we are getting an entire series on one of the most beloved characters of Ronan Lynch, I'm excited to see where this goes, because he is by far one of the most complex characters in the series, and you just want to give him a hug. Because that poor kid. Okay, everything that he's gone through with the death of his family and... God, okay. What I appreciated about the original series so much was that the author took the time to really build the relationships and bonds between the characters. And we got to see them as individuals and really understand who they were, what their motivations were, and what their end goal was. Not everything was based on this melodramatic teenage angst that we often see in young adult fiction. They each learned that they can love and they can trust and that they are not alone and they don't have to face the world and its challenges on their own, that you can rely on somebody, and these friendships only grew in strength and the bonds just solidified, and I am so thankful that we got to see that. I absolutely loved the Raven cycle because I think it is extremely important for teenagers and young adults and everybody of all ages really to see and experience healthy relationships. Easily my favorite relationship in the entire series is the one that slowly develops between Ronan Lynch and Adam Parrish. It is probably one of the most popular and beloved relationships to have ever come out of a book series. I honestly was rooting for them from the beginning. I went into the series originally not knowing anything about them, and from the moment that I read about Adam handling Ronan's phone calls and talking to his brother on his behalf and everything, like, I was like, ah, they're perfect. And I was like, from that moment, I was like, okay, they need to get together. And then Adam got together with Blue, and I was like, ah, come on, you gotta be kidding me. But it happened. It eventually happened, and it was great, and I loved it. And we have 4 books slowly building this relationship that just becomes an adorable love story that you can't help but embrace. It's a homosexual relationship that is done in a way that feels natural. I love the relationship and the progression because it doesn't feel forced, and there's hints and clues that this is building, that this is coming, that something exists throughout the entire series, and when it happens, it is a great example to the youth and the teenagers that you can love whoever you want to love. This is a great example of a relationship, a same-sex relationship that doesn't end in tragedy as we often do see. There's no social expectations that are forced on it. It's a same-sex relationship that is treated like any other relationship that you would see anywhere. There's acceptance. The other characters around them just roll with it, and that's exactly how it should be in real life. It doesn't matter who your best friend is dating or who your brother is dating or anything like that. Like, it's not their business, and if they've found companionship and acceptance and love with somebody, then you should just be happy for them. So when I heard that a sequel series was planned, I was ecstatic, especially since it was focused on Ronan, who is by far one of my favorite characters in the entire world, but I had some concern. The Raven Cycle was an exceptional series because it did not rely on the overblown melodramatic relationships that you often see with popular CW teenage dramas. Relationships imploding and falling apart over a small situation that could easily have been resolved with a very short conversation or a sentence or two. The Raven Cycle instead focused on the bonds, and the bonds of family, and the bonds of friendship, and the bonds of kindling romance. It was about creating family, whether they are related by blood or they are found. So what am I worried about? This author has clearly demonstrated that she is fully capable of weaving stories about complex characters in realistic relationships without blowing everything way out of proportion just to create drama and conflict. But you're also looking at 2 characters that are not exactly the most communicative. There's just a bit of worry that some of that macho bullshit is going to get in the way and destroy their relationship. I'm worried that we're going to see Adam and Ronan slowly unravel and drift apart or be ripped apart, or something is going to create a conflict that is going to just destroy them. And I don't want to see that because I absolutely enjoy, we're surrounded by so much that is unhealthy. And I think that it's important for the younger generations and the older generations to have representation and an example of real goals. Like, people kept calling the Joker and Harley relationship goals, and that is a horrific relationship. That is not something you should ever want to emulate. And Ronan and Adam have this relationship that is beautiful. They have their own conflicts and they have their own dramas, but it's never anything that cannot be solved. And these people, they're not trying to change each other. They accept each other for exactly who they are. And I don't want to see that destroyed. Another thing I'm also afraid of is losing Gansey. The author spent so much time building up the relationships of the previous series that I'm afraid to watch them unravel. Like, I don't want to see them lose contact and drift away like you often see. You've seen so many books and so many TV series and movies where you have a character that's introduced, that's integral to the plot, is an integral part of a character's life, and then they're just gone. Never mentioned again. And as an example, let's just say, Danny and Teen Wolf. What happened to him? He's never mentioned again. And he just vanished. Is Gansey going to be there? He's off on his road trip, isn't he? I don't know exactly where the story is picking up. Probably someplace after Opal, which was the short novella that was released. So are Blue and Gansey and Henry going to be present? Because I want to see them maintain their relationships. Another common trope that young adult fiction usually falls into is this idea of insecurity and possession, which is completely unhealthy. And I don't want to see this happen to any of the relationships. What I'm hoping is that we see external conflicts and internal personal conflict, but don't necessarily put their relationships in jeopardy. It's more important to handle it together. Another thing I'm absolutely terrified of is that a character is going to die. And not just because a character may die, but because they just die for dramatic effect. A character's death needs to serve a purpose. And often we find young adult authors writing deaths of characters just for the shock value. And I really don't want to see that in this series. I'm also hoping that we get to explore some of the other minor characters that we saw in the Raven cycle. Like the brothers, like the Lynch brothers. I'd like to see more of their backstory. I'd like to see more of who they are, because we only got a very obscured, unreliable view of Declan through Ronan's eyes, because Ronan and Declan sort of clash, right? So who is he really? Like, he clearly does care about his family in his own way, but where is his head at? I want to see that. I'm hoping that we get to see more people like Ronan, how they interact with the world, and I don't know, I'm just excited. I have a lot of fears and a lot of hopes for this series, but I'm just excited because it's a series focusing on Ronan, and I absolutely adore Ronan. So a series that's going to follow him is going to be epic, because he is such an angry boy that you just, you want to be terrified of him, but at the same time you want to give him a hug. And plus there's the fact that this series is going to follow a gay protagonist, and that's not the plot. Okay? That's not even made to be one of his defining characteristics. He's just Ronan, and he happens to be in love with another boy. Okay, so that's it for now. Those are some of my hopes and expectations and what I feel a little conflicted about going into reading this book. So right now I'm gonna go and get started on the book, and I will hopefully come back and let you know what I think. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you liked my video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. What are your hopes for the series? What do you want to see? And if you enjoyed this video, maybe check out some of my other ones. Alright, cheers!